Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. There is something uniquely unsettling about feeling unsafe in your own home. It's the one place where we are supposed to be shielded from the outside world, yet for some, that sanctuary becomes a site of pure terror. Today, we're diving into 3 true stories from people who realized they weren't as alone as they thought. Make sure you've checked your locks and turned down the lights, because these stories are coming to you straight from the shadows of a quiet living room. Let's get into it.
Our first story comes from Mark, who had just moved into a charming, albeit slightly creaky, Victorian house in the suburbs. For the first few weeks, everything seemed perfect. He loved the high ceilings and the historical character of the place. However, the atmosphere shifted during his first rainy night alone. As he sat reading in his study, he began to hear a rhythmic thudding coming from the floorboards directly above him. He knew the attic was supposed to be empty, yet the sound was deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth in a small circle. Mark tried to brush it off as the house settling, but the pacing continued for hours. Around 3 a.m., the thudding stopped and was replaced by a soft, melodic whispering. It sounded like a child humming a lullaby, muffled by the insulation. Summoning his courage, Mark grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the attic pull-down stairs in the hallway. The air grew colder with every step he took toward the ceiling. When he finally pulled the ladder down, the whispering stopped instantly, leaving only the sound of his own heavy breathing and the rain hitting the roof.
He climbed up and scanned the room with his light. The attic was bare, except for a single antique wooden rocking chair sitting right in the center of the floor. What chilled him to the bone wasn't just the chair itself, but the fact that it was still slowly rocking back and forth as if someone had just jumped out of it. Scattered around the base of the chair were several small, hand-carved wooden figurines that hadn't been there when he did his initial walkthrough. Mark moved out 3 days later, and the figurines are still there, waiting for the next owner.
The second story takes us to a quiet cul-de-sac where Sarah lived alone. One Tuesday evening, while she was washing dishes, she had that prickly sensation on the back of her neck, the feeling of being watched. She looked at the reflection in the kitchen window, which overlooked her dark backyard. At first, she saw nothing but her own face. But then, as her eyes adjusted, she noticed a pair of pale hands pressed against the glass from the outside, just below the level of the counter. They were long, thin fingers, perfectly still against the pane.
Frozen with fear, Sarah didn't scream. She slowly backed away from the sink, keeping her eyes fixed on those hands. Suddenly, a face rose up from the darkness. It wasn't a person she recognized. It was a man with wide, unblinking eyes and a wide, static grin that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't try to break in. He just stood there, staring at her through the glass, while slowly tapping one fingernail against the pane. The sound was a sharp, rhythmic tink, tink, tink that seemed to echo through the entire silent house.
She scrambled for her phone and dialed 911, retreating into her bedroom and locking the door. By the time the police arrived, the figure was gone. However, the officers found something that made Sarah's blood run cold. In the soft mud directly beneath the kitchen window, there weren't just footprints from that night. There were deep ruts in the dirt, indicating that someone had been crouching there, night after night, for weeks. He hadn't just appeared that evening. He had been watching her every single night while she did her dishes, waiting for her to finally notice him.
Our final story involves a modern apartment in the city. David was a tech professional who lived in a high-rise. He started noticing small things out of place. A loaf of bread moved from the counter to the fridge. His keys were on the nightstand instead of the hook. He assumed he was just stressed and forgetful. To put his mind at ease, he installed a motion-activated camera in his living room. The first few nights showed nothing but the occasional dust mote drifting through the air. But on the 4th night, the camera captured something David will never forget.
At 2:14 a.m., the footage showed a small maintenance hatch in the ceiling of his kitchen slowly sliding open. A very thin woman, dressed in tattered clothing, lowered herself down with the agility of an insect. She spent 45 minutes in his kitchen, eating his food directly from the containers and standing over David's couch while he slept, just watching him breathe. She didn't steal anything valuable. She just existed in his space, appearing like a ghost, and then retreating back into the ceiling crawl space before the sun came up. She had been living in the vents for months.
When the police searched the building's ventilation system, they found a small nest built out of David's stolen blankets and pillows. There were also dozens of photos of David taken from a distance, pinned to the metal walls of the ducting. The woman was never caught. She had vanished through the interconnected vents of the building before the authorities could seal the exits. David moved out that same day, but even now, in his new home, he finds himself looking up at the ceiling vents every time he hears a faint scrape or a rattle in the pipes.
It's a terrifying thought that the place we feel safest can be shared with someone or something we don't even know is there. These stories remind us to always be aware of our surroundings, even when the doors are locked. If you enjoyed these true tales of domestic horror, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates. Sleep tight if you can, and I'll see you in the next one.